So this is going to be a really quick get started video with Adobe Premiere. Adobe Premiere is definitely one of the more user-friendly video editors. So let's imagine that you've gone to a retail store, you've bought a GoPro, you've taken some footage, and what you want to do is cut that footage together, put a soundtrack behind, and export it and put it on YouTube, which is a pretty straightforward requirement. So you launch Adobe Premiere, you get this window. This will contain the history of other videos that you've done, but of course you've just started, so you won't have any history listed here. So all you need to do is new project here. So this is going to be GoPro first video, and then decide where you're going to save it. So I've got a SSD here, Steve directory, that's fine, I'll save it there. And if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, it's worth having CUDA enabled because that will accelerate a lot of the effects and make playback a bit smoother too. And then go OK. And what you have is a default layout for editing. Now, all these panels can be moved. If you see here, as soon as you move your mouse over and it goes to an edge of anything, you can change the ratio of all these panels. So you can customize it exactly to how you work. You can also then save your customization under your name, like I've done up here, and then recall it with a single click. Adobe, though, provides you several different panel layouts, which are very useful, particularly the color one for editing. It brings extra functionality to your workflow. So we'll go through that when we hit basic color grading. But here is where you're concerned with first. This is where you're going to get your footage in. And as you can see, it says import media to start. It's your project folder. It's got GoPro first video, the title that you gave it when you first launched Adobe Premiere. I would suggest that you would probably already have the window open because you probably have a sneaky look at the GoPro footage just after you've taken it. So you probably have it here. So the easiest way to get your footage in my view, is just select it within your normal Explorer or Finder window and drag it in. And that's it. And as you can see, the footage is there. Now at the moment, that's a thumbnail view. You can change this. You've got like a little list view here. I would seriously suggest right at the beginning and get into a habit of creating folders. So for example, we could call this footage, and then we can drag all the footage in here. And then I could create a bin called audio. And you can then organize all your footage. And if you bear in mind that although this video may be very simple, in the future, you may be dealing with videos with a lot of assets. I mean, some of the large corporate videos I work on maybe have over 1,000 assets in them. And if I didn't organize them in a way like this, I would never be able to find them, or I would spend most of my day trying to find them. So this is a good discipline to get into. So here's your footage. Now, at this point, I'm going to now go to a thumbnail view, open a separate window just by double clicking it so I can see my footage again. I could just drag this straight on to the timeline. What that would do though, is that would take both the video and the audio. And as you know, with cameras put on cars, that's just wind noise that you don't really want. Take both the video and the audio and the entire length of the clip. And then you'd spend a lot of time mucking around trying to find the bit that you want. So the best thing is don't hit the timeline at this point. Just double click on the file and you have this window called the source window. And this is really just a player for the clips in here. That's all it is. And this will allow you to select the bit that you want to work on. So I like the beginning. So I'm going to press I to mark in, or click on the little button. And I'm going to go to the bit that I like, where I think it should logically end. And there's a card just coming up here that looks good. And I'm going to go out. And if you notice, we've now got this portion highlighted. Now this has done nothing to the file. It hasn't chopped it up. It hasn't changed it. All it's doing is setting a selection for you to then be able to drag that onto the timeline and not the entire file. So when you want to drag it on the timeline, you've then got these two buttons underneath extra. You could just drag the footage, but if you drag this, it says drag video only or drag audio only. So if I drag this onto the timeline, I then don't get the audio, which is great. Now, just as a quick background, if I did drag this on and I got both audio, You can get rid of it. Just click on the clip, right click, unlink, and then select the audio and delete. Or you could mute the audio and leave the audio actually on the track if you wanted. It's up to you. But I just think it's a much neater way of just dragging it off the source window without even having the audio attached to it. And as you see here, another window's popped up, and this is your program window, which is basically going to be showing the result of your edit and selection on your timeline. So this is just for the timeline, and this one is just for the source. Now, a quick tip, you can see underneath here, you've got things like full, half, quarter, eighth. This is the resolution of both these playback windows. And if you've got massive footage, maybe 6K footage or something, and your computer can't handle it without playing it very jerky, then set these down to a lower resolution and you'll find it'll play fine. So that's just useful to know. You've also got this little one here where you can set the scale of the actual window. But to be honest, most of the time fit is good. It fits into the window and that's great. So there's our first chunk. So now let's pick something else. We've got a car shot here. So again, double click. This gets loaded in the source window. And that looks quite good. We're going to set an in point there. And we're going to set an out point there. And again, just drag the video. So now if you play this back, you'll see that it'll go straight from that onto the hill. And then, I don't know, something else to finish with. This time, let's drag too much, and then we can show the ways of editing. So, play this. And drag just the video onto the timeline. Now, if we played this through and we thought this one's a little bit too long, if we use this bar at the bottom to zoom in and then move the mouse over the end, you'll see the mouse will change into like a handle. And you can just trim that down, which is dead easy. But supposing you wanted the end bit, but you didn't want this beginning bit here on the curve. If you did the same technique like that, just click and drag, that's fine. And then you can click and move it. But there's other ways you can do this. And these are my favorite keys. You've got Control K, which is just inserts a cut wherever the playhead is. The playhead is this blue bar here. Or you've got the V, which is your selection tool, which I have active right now, this arrow. And then you have C, which is your razor tool, which allows you to cut out a chunk. And then you have B, which is called Ripple Select. And what this does is it changes to a handle at the beginning exactly as before, but this time yellow instead of red. Click and drag, move it to where you want it to start. But you'll notice that the whole clip has automatically slid to the left, so you don't have to then move it, which saves a nice bit of work. So Control K, if I did that where the playhead is now, you can see it's immediately put in a cut. Control Z undo. So if you get used to those shortcuts, there's pretty much nothing you can't do. You know, so your cut, your C, your V for selection, your B for ripple edit, and your Control K just as a very quick way of adding a simple cut. Saves you changing to C. It means you can stay on your selection tool and then just press Control K and you've got your cut. So very, very useful. So muck around with those, see what you can do. Now that we've got those there, let's talk about transitions. So they're all held in your effects. And you've got video transitions here, dissolve, and this is super easy. So if you grab the dissolve and put it on the join, what will happen is you'll have, instead of a cut, you'll have a dissolve. And if we zoom in a bit on that timeline, again, move your mouse to the edge of the dissolve and you can drag it out to take a longer period of time. And that's it. So that's dead easy. Now, and something else to be aware of, if you click on this clip and then go up to here where effects controls are, you can see that you've got opacity, speed, all these different things. They all affect the clip that is selected at the moment. So where there's a stopwatch, you can animate. And this is super easy. Wherever I click this keyframe button, it'll be added wherever the playhead is. So in this instance, it's right at the beginning. And I can put that alpha that out like that. I can then play it. And then I can alpha that back up. And you'll see that's done exactly the same effect as this crossfade. Now you might ask, why would you need to do it there? Well, when you start stacking layers and having different opacities on different layers, like you might want to introduce sort of a ghosting effect or a lens flare effect or all sorts of stuff, then this is the area you want to be. Also, you've got your scale. And you can see now that's zooming out like that. It's a pretty awful effect, but at least you get the idea. And with your rotation as well, you can animate that. So you can move the keyframes around, by the way. You can see that I've just set a keyframe there, which is like your normal one. And I could do that now. And you can see that that's going in like that. Again, if you want to delete the keyframes, use your mouse, select round them, press delete. And now that won't do that awful rotate. If you want to speed them up, you could grab both of those, just move them back. Or even more. So remember, explore. You know, you can change just about everything over time using this, using your stopwatches, setting keyframes, and just have a bit of fun. So we've now experimented with transitions, cuts, taking stuff out, being organized in your folders. What about basic color correction? Now in color correction, the best panel for this is a panel called Lumetri. If you type it in here, close the presets, you'll see Lumetri here. Now you could drag Lumetri on here, and here it all is here. Now, as you see, there's stopwatches, so again, you could change all this over time. And if I do a change, you can see the effect. But as I move on to the next one, the effect hasn't carried through. So you could just click on Lumetri, make sure this clip is selected, click on Lumetri, right click, copy, move on to here, select this clip, and then paste in here. And as you can see, some of the flavor is carried through. That's one way of doing it. Let's now undo all that. Okay, so we're back to where we were. A nicer way is to go to your project window, click down here, new item, and adjustment layer. Click OK, then drag the adjustment layer onto the top, because adjustment layers work from the top down. So you could have 100 layers of video underneath this, and the adjustment layer would affect all of them with whatever you put on there. So now we go to our effects, Lumetri, do the same thing. And as you see, that coloration is carried through. If I can toggle that on and off, by the way, using the effects button, or visibility on the layer there. So if you want to see the before and after, it's quite handy. So that's dead easy. There we go. So that's looking quite dramatic. Now we did mention before about color panels or different layouts to help with color grading. So if you click on the color one here, you'll notice that all your controls are automatically there. You've got the opportunity then to have your scopes on here if you want while you're grading, and everything becomes a lot more slick and easy. The other advantage is if you're not working with adjustment layers, let's move that across. Can you see it's automatically selected the clip as we've gone along, and it will automatically put an interleumetry onto those clips. The downside is you're back to the situation where you have to do each one individually. But as you see, because it's doing them, it's selecting them as we go, this is a lot easier than before. And you're also getting all your information in your scopes all in one screen, where you can check whether you've got whites blown out, blacks crushed, etc., or whether your skin tones are on, all that kind of stuff. But that's all for another tutorial. So for now, let's keep it simple. I'm going to undo all those color changes. Remember, Control Z is your friend, definitely. We're going to go back to our editing layout. And what we're going to do now is, how about add a title? So move the playhead to where you want the title to start. Press your type tool. And we're going to type in here, car journey. Okay. And now a little aside, if you right click on the program monitor, enable safe margins, you get your center markers and everything like that. It's very useful for positioning elements correctly. I'm going to take that off now. You also have a drawing tool. Get this rectangle tool, draw a rectangle. If you notice, it works from the top down. So at the moment, the shape, the gray shape is on top of the text. But if we click and hold and drag, we can change that order. You've also then got all sorts of controls with the text. Now, if we play that, you'll see that you've got a white text on a black box. And with the black box, if you wanted to, you could alpha it out a bit. Obviously, you can change all the property of the text. You've got all different things here. And you could clearly animate the rotation, scale, position, all that. But what's useful with later versions of Adobe Premiere is that you've got a vector motion area, which allows you to then control everything within that box. That all counts as a single sort of graphic. So in that case, what we could do is click the stopwatch to add a keyframe, set it to 0. Let's play it a little bit and then set that to 100. And as you can see, when you play this back, you've got animation there. So it's all very simple. And of course, your video transitions, like your dissolves, can also go onto that. So if I now play that, then that alphas out. It's all very simple. So that's that. So how about now a soundtrack? So go back to your project window. And what I would do is go to your list view, click on audio. If you've created an audio folder, if you haven't, it just imports it into the root. Then you can go right click, import, and let's have a look at some sounds. That'll do. Go open. So if I open the audio folder now, you can see there is the soundtrack. And if I drag that onto the timeline, obviously it's dragged the entire thing, but make your handle at the end, drag all the way back, and then zoom back in. And if I play that, you should see the meters here showing that there is now sound. Of course, all the fades and everything like that, transitions, also exist for audio. So if you go back to your effects, and if you go to audio transitions, select crossfade and just drag one of these on, then that will fade it out. And if you watch the meters, you'll see them dropping. And like before, you can extend the length of that fade. I don't know whether you also see, but you've got this line here, and this line is basically the audio level. But the good news is you can keyframe along this line. So let's suppose you had somebody talking and they started talking here, and you still wanted the music, but you wanted the music level to drop. If you hold your control key, you'll see it turns into a plus on this line. And click there, move a little bit along, control, click. And if you drag this line down, can you see it's now put a fade? So if we play this, if you watch the audio levels, you'll see they'll drop. So let's suppose your commentator talks and he stops talking here, or they stop talking here. Add in a keyframe, drag the other one back up, and you'll see the levels will then rise back up. This is really useful. Now, if you go to your effects controls, can you see that you've got the keyframes here as well? It's already put them on. It's just this is a much more intuitive way, because typically when you're adjusting levels of sound, you're doing it in sync with somebody talking or other sounds. And so to do it directly on the timeline is preferable than to doing it over in the effects area. So that's pretty much it. So if we just have a very quick recap. So on your project window, this is where you bring in all your footage. So you drag your footage off the folder that you've got it on into here, and try and be as organized as possible here. When you're going through your footage, when you double click on it, it'll launch it into the source window here. And the job of this source window is to allow you to select the portion of that entire clip that you want to use. So you play through, you set your in and out points. So here we go. Set your in and out points, and then using these buttons or dragging the video if you want all of it, you put that onto your timeline. Once you put that onto your timeline, you're now in a position to then get on and edit the file and do your cuts, your fades and everything else, and your titles and your music. So this timeline then generates this program window, and this program window is actually showing you your edit, your entire edit. When you're doing your different tasks, it's worth exploring the different layouts here, but always remember that you can set your layouts however you want, and you can save them to suit you, because everybody works in different ways. So, bear that in mind. And remember, when you're editing on the timeline, the best shortcuts that I use, or the most common ones I use, is V for your selection, C for your razor tool to cut bits out, and B for ripple edit, this one here, which means that when you drag one end or the other end of that bit of footage, it'll automatically move the others with it. So you end up not having to drag stuff around. If you don't want to do that, go back to V, and as you can see, you can just drag. And so now there's an actual gap. It's up to you. But the best thing is know what they do. Also remember, Control K is your friend for adding a cut, and Control Z is an absolute lifesaver in undoing whatever you last did, or up to however many levels you've got set in Premiere. So that's pretty simple as far as I'm aware. So we've created a very short video, we've put a soundtrack, we've done a few fades, and we've done a little bit of color correction, and we put titles. So now we want to get this masterpiece out to YouTube. So making sure your timeline is selected, then go to File, Export, Media, and you will get this window. Here's your timeline here, so you can scrub along with this. And it's always worth checking at the end, because sometimes if you've left some clips and stuff a long way after the video, say you move stuff over to the right just to keep it there to remind you to do other things, it'll render the entire lot. So you might just get like 5 minutes of black, and then it'll hit some clips that you left on the timeline without remembering. So just check that you've definitely got this correct. You can also use these little handles to shorten the export. So you don't have to cancel this window and go back to Premiere if you have selected more than you need. You can do it here. That aside, then have a look here. You've got H.264, which is your default MP4 codec, which is fine. And you've got nice YouTube presets down here. So we're going to go YouTube 2160, which is your Ultra HD. And that will optimize everything for YouTube. Then what we do is we select a path and a name. So I'm going to call this GoPro video. And you could press Q. Q puts it out to Media Encoder, and Media Encoder has a great role in that it can render multiple different projects. So it sort of queues them, and it'll keep pumping them out as long as you keep adding stuff to it. But for this instance, we can just export, because all we're doing is this single video. So click on export, and off it goes. Once you've done that, you can have a look at your masterpiece. And there it is in all its glory. It's then a very simple job of selecting that file and uploading it to YouTube, whereupon the file will instantly go viral and you'll become a millionaire within days, allegedly. So hopefully that's shown you to start and finish of a very simple edit and a very simple export to a file that YouTube understands and will look good on YouTube. Just take your time to familiarize yourself with the different areas of what Premiere does. But the more you use it, the quicker you get, and the more organized you are, the easier your job will be. So I hope that was some use.